There is a moment that many men have experienced, yet very few ever talk about. It is not some dramatic scene from a movie. It is usually a quiet moment that happens when you are doing something completely ordinary. Maybe you are sitting somewhere enjoying a cup of coffee. Maybe you are walking through a busy street. Maybe you are standing in a room full of people, thinking about nothing in particular. Then you happen to look up and a younger woman is looking at you. She is not looking through you. She is not looking past you. She is not scanning the room trying to find someone else. For a brief second, her attention is on you. And before your mind has time to organize a single thought, you feel something. It is subtle, but it is there. Something wakes up inside you. Not because she said anything, not because anything happened, just because for one tiny moment you felt noticed. Then your thoughts arrive. You tell yourself not to get carried away. You tell yourself she probably wasn't looking at you at all. You tell yourself that you imagined the whole thing. You come up with explanation after explanation because each one feels safer than admitting what you felt in that first second. You don't want to feel foolish. You don't want to build a story around something that may have meant nothing. So you push the feeling down and continue with your day. But the strange thing is that the feeling doesn't completely disappear. It follows you. Later that evening, it comes back into your mind, not because you are obsessed with it, but because something about the moment felt real before you had a chance to talk yourself out of it. Deep down, you know there was a difference between that first feeling and all the doubts that came after it. What many men never realize is that they have spent years learning how to dismiss themselves. They have become so quick to doubt their own experiences that they no longer stop and ask where those doubts came from. Somewhere along the way, they accepted a story about what attraction is supposed to look like and who is allowed to experience it. And that story has been shaping the way they see themselves ever since. You have probably heard that story for so long that part of you accepts it without even thinking. It shows up in little comments people make. It shows up in the way movies tell certain stories and ignore others. It shows up in conversations where people act as if attraction is something that follows a strict set of rules. After hearing it enough times, many men begin carrying those rules around in their own heads. The story usually sounds something like this. If a woman is younger, she could never genuinely be interested in an older man unless there is some other reason behind it. Maybe she wants attention. Maybe she wants security. Maybe she is confused. People come up with all kinds of explanations because those explanations feel easier than accepting something much simpler. The problem is that attraction does not happen the way people talk about it. Attraction is not a math equation. It is not something that waits for permission from other people before it appears. It happens much deeper than that. It happens in places most people never stop to think about. When a woman feels drawn toward a man, she is not sitting there with a checklist in her hand comparing dates of birth. She is responding to something she feels. She is responding to how she experiences him. She is responding to whether being around him feels comfortable or uncomfortable, calming or stressful, genuine or forced. That is why so many men become confused. They are trying to understand attraction, music through the lens of social expectations, while the woman is experiencing it through feelings she may not even fully understand herself. They keep looking at numbers while she is responding to something completely different. And until you understand that difference, you will keep measuring yourself against standards that were never being used in the first place. What she is feeling are signals, not the kind of signals people talk about online and not the kind that can be reduced to a simple list. These are the quiet signals that happen underneath conscious thought. They are the signals that tell her whether she can relax around you or whether she needs to keep her guard up. Most men assume a younger woman notices the obvious things first. They assume she is paying attention to appearance, status, or how confidently a man carries himself. Those things can certainly catch someone's attention, but attention and attraction are not the same thing. Plenty of people attract attention. Far fewer create the feeling that makes someone want to stay close. A woman is constantly picking up information from the way a man moves through the world. She notices whether he seems comfortable with himself or whether he is constantly trying to prove something. She notices whether he listens because he is genuinely interested or whether he is simply waiting for his turn to speak. She notices whether being around him feels peaceful or exhausting. The funny thing is that many of the qualities older men worry about are often the very things creating those positive signals. Maybe you are less interested in competing with everyone around you. Maybe you no longer feel the need to impress every person you meet. Maybe you have become more thoughtful, more patient, or more selective about where you put your energy. Many men see those changes as signs that they are losing something. Some women see them as signs that you have finally found something, because what she is often responding to is not how young you look. She is responding to the man you have become through the years you have lived. And those are two completely different things. Most people completely misunderstand what is happening when a younger woman feels a genuine connection with an older man. They look at the situation from the outside and immediately start creating explanations. They assume she must be sacrificing something. They assume she is settling. They assume there has to be some hidden reason because the connection does not fit the picture they have in their heads. What they never stop to consider is that she may be responding to qualities that only time can develop. Think about what life does to a man who has actually paid attention to the lessons it has been trying to teach him over the years. He learns that not every disagreement needs to become a battle. He learns that not every opinion needs to be defended. He learns that constantly chasing approval is exhausting. Little by little, life sands away some of the rough edges. A younger woman may not sit down and consciously analyze these things, but she feels them. She feels the difference between being around someone who is comfortable in his own skin and being around someone who is constantly trying to prove his worth. She feels the difference between a man who reacts to everything and a man who remains steady when life becomes difficult. For many women, that steadiness feels rare. The world is full of noise. It is full of competition, comparison, pressure, and people trying to convince everyone else that they matter. Then she meets a man who seems at peace with himself, a man who is not desperately seeking attention, a man who does not need every conversation to revolve around him. What she often feels in that moment is not excitement, it is relief. And sometimes relief is far more powerful than people realize. If you're still watching at this point, make sure you subscribe. We still have some important ground to cover, and what comes next may help you understand this whole topic in a completely different way. Now, let's continue. One of the easiest ways to understand this is to think about the difference between a man who needs attention and a man who is comfortable without it. Most people notice the first man immediately. He walks into a room and wants everyone to know he is there. He works hard to create an impression. He wants people to see how funny he is, how successful he is, or how confident he is. There is nothing necessarily wrong with that, but there is often a hidden tension underneath it. It feels as though he is asking the room for something. Then there is another kind of man. He enters the same room, but his energy feels completely different. He is not trying to become the center of attention. He is not constantly checking to see how people are responding to him. He laughs when something is funny. He speaks when he has something worth saying. He does not seem burdened by the need to convince anyone of his value. A younger woman notices that difference more than most men realize. She may not consciously think about it. She may not even be able to explain it to a friend. Afterward, she simply feels different around that second man. There is less pressure, less noise, less performance. That is because confidence is not always loud. In fact, some of the strongest confidence a person can possess is completely silent. It shows up in the way someone sits, listens, smiles, and allows things to unfold naturally without forcing them. And for many women, that quiet confidence feels incredibly attractive because it allows them to relax and be themselves instead of feeling like they are participating in another competition for attention. Now, let's go a little deeper because noticing a man is only the beginning. What keeps a woman interested is something far more important. This is where many men get confused. They spend years focusing on things that might get attention while completely overlooking the things that create genuine connection. A lot of men believe attraction is mainly about appearance. They assume that if they looked younger, dressed differently, or had a different lifestyle, everything would suddenly fall into place. While appearance can open a door, it rarely determines what happens after that door opens. What matters much more is the experience a woman has when she is around you. She notices things you may not even realize. She is noticing. She notices whether your voice sounds rushed or calm. She notices whether you seem comfortable in the conversation or whether you are constantly trying to steer it in a certain direction. She notices whether you are sharing your thoughts because you genuinely want to connect or because you are hoping to impress her. She also notices how you look at her, not whether you stare at her, but whether you actually see her. There is a difference. One man sees a woman as someone he hopes will validate him. Another man sees her as a real person with her own experiences, opinions, fears, and dreams. Women can feel that difference much faster than most men realize. Then there is something else that is harder to describe. It is what happens when a man stops performing, when he stops carefully managing every word, trying to create the perfect image and worrying about how he is being judged. The moment that performance disappears, the interaction changes. The conversation feels lighter. The pressure disappears. She no longer feels like she has to figure out who you are because she can already feel that you are being genuine. And when a woman feels that kind of ease around a man, she often remembers it long after the conversation is over. Because genuine comfort has become surprisingly rare, and rare things have a way of staying in people's music minds. There is another quality that many older men possess without realizing how powerful it is. And that quality is their relationship with silence. Most people are uncomfortable with silence. The moment a conversation slows down, they rush to fill the empty space. They tell another story, make another joke, ask another question, anything to keep things moving. They assume that if the conversation becomes quiet for even a few seconds, something must be wrong. A younger woman notices this more than most men realize. At some point during a conversation, there will almost always be a pause. It might happen because she is thinking about something you said. It might happen because she is deciding how she wants to respond. It might happen for no reason at all. The question is not whether the silence happens. The question is how you respond to it. Some men become visibly uncomfortable. They rush to rescue the conversation before the silence has a chance to exist. In doing so, they reveal something about themselves. They reveal that they are uncomfortable sitting with stillness. They reveal that they need constant movement in order to feel secure. But a man who is comfortable with himself responds differently. He allows the moment to breathe. He doesn't panic. He doesn't scramble for something clever to say. He simply stays present. That simple ability communicates more than most men realize. It tells her that you are comfortable in your own company. It tells her that you do not need constant reassurance. It tells her that your sense of peace does not disappear the moment the room becomes quiet. And something interesting often happens when a woman feels that kind of calm energy. She relaxes. She stops feeling responsible for carrying the conversation. She stops feeling pressure to perform. Instead of creating distance, the silence creates space. Space for honesty, space for comfort, space for a connection that feels natural rather than forced. That is why silence is not empty. In the right hands, silence becomes one of the clearest ways a person can communicate confidence. This brings us to something many people misunderstand when they look at a connection between a younger woman and an older man. From the outside, people often assume she is simply following a temporary feeling. They assume she is caught up in the excitement of something different. They assume that sooner or later she will come to her senses and realize she should have wanted something else. Music. What they don't understand is that many women arrive at these feelings after collecting experiences that taught them exactly what they no longer want. A lot of younger women have already spent time in relationships that looked wonderful from a distance, but felt exhausting once they were living inside them. They have been with men who were charming one moment and impossible to understand the next. They have experienced relationships where they constantly had to guess what kind of mood they were. Walking into dot, they have loved people who made them feel excited, but rarely made them feel calm. Over time, those experiences leave an impression. They begin teaching her that excitement and peace are not always the same thing. As she gets older and learns more about herself, her attention starts shifting toward different qualities. She becomes less interested in what looks impressive from the outside and more interested in how a person makes her feel when nobody else is watching. She begins paying attention to whether a man can handle disagreement without turning it into a fight. She notices whether he listens to understand or simply waits for his chance to win. She notices whether his confidence feels steady or whether it disappears the moment something doesn't go his way. Then she meets a man who feels different, a man who doesn't seem to be fighting the world, a man who doesn't need every conversation to become a competition, a man who can disagree without becoming cruel and who can listen without becoming defensive. Being around him feels easier. She doesn't have to constantly monitor the situation. She doesn't have to prepare herself for unnecessary drama. What she feels is relief, and for many women, music, that feeling is far more powerful than people realize, because genuine peace is something they have spent a long time searching for. Let's slow down for a moment, because what we're about to talk about sits at the center of this entire conversation. Everything we've discussed so far, the calmness, the steadiness, the way she feels around you, all of it leads to one question that many women are asking without ever saying it out loud. The question has very little to do with your income, your appearance, or even your age. What she is really trying to discover is whether she can be herself around you. Most women have spent years adjusting themselves to fit the people around them. They have learned when to hold back an opinion, when to stay quiet about a feeling, and when to pretend something doesn't bother them just to keep the peace. Sometimes they do it without even realizing it. It becomes a habit. They start measuring every word before they say it and every emotion before they show it. That is why a woman pays close attention to how a man reacts when she shows him who she really is. Maybe she shares an opinion that she knows not everyone will agree with. Maybe she talks about something important to her. Maybe she expresses a feeling that isn't neat, simple, or easy to deal with. In those moments, she is watching carefully, not because she wants an argument and not because she is trying to test you, but because she wants to know if it is safe to be real. When a man becomes uncomfortable every time she expresses something difficult, she notices. When he immediately tries to correct her, fix her, or make her smaller so that he can feel more comfortable, she notices that too. Little by little, she begins holding parts of herself back. But when she is with a man who remains grounded, who listens without becoming defensive, and who doesn't need her to change in order to feel secure, something different happens. She relaxes. She stops editing herself. She stops carrying the pressure of constantly managing another person's emotions. For many women, that feeling is incredibly rare, and once they experience it, they do not forget it easily. Now we arrive at the heart of everything we've been talking about. If you strip away all the opinions, all the assumptions people make, and all the conversations about age, what remains is something surprisingly simple. A younger woman who feels drawn to an older man is often responding to the way she feels when she is around him, not the way she thinks she is supposed to feel, not the way other people tell her she should feel, the way she actually feels. Deep down, she is asking herself a question. She may never say it out loud, and she may not even realize she is asking it, but the question is there. Do I feel more like myself when I am around this man? Do I feel comfortable enough to relax? Do I feel accepted instead of evaluated? Do I feel like I can grow into more of who I am instead of shrinking music to fit someone else's expectations? That is why this conversation was never really about age. It was about presence. It was about character. It was about the kind of man you become after years of learning, failing, growing, and discovering what truly matters. The qualities that many men worry about losing with age are often the same, qualities that make them deeply attractive to the right woman. The patience, the steadiness, the ability to listen, the ability to remain calm when life becomes difficult, the ability to make another person feel safe enough to be completely themselves. You may have spent years asking yourself whether you are too old, whether you missed your chance, or whether younger women could ever genuinely appreciate what you have to offer. But perhaps that was never the right question. A better question is whether your presence makes the people around you feel more free, more comfortable, and more understood. If you've enjoyed this conversation and would like more discussions about female psychology, relationships, attraction, confidence, and human behavior, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. There is so much more for us to explore together, and remember this: the right woman is not looking at the number of years you have lived and deciding your value from that alone. She is looking at the man those years have helped create. When you stop apologizing for your age and start appreciating the wisdom, calmness, and strength that has given you, you begin to see yourself differently. And often that is exactly when other people begin seeing you differently too.